to talk to you a little bit today about social media, about community, and about how the two of them come together with commerce. I work for a company called Aptaros, which is, among other things, a Magento enterprise partner, has an on-demand SaaS platform called Ocentric that's based on Magento and Drupal integrated together, and also does custom development design work on top of Magento in the enterprise edition. So Aptaros' focus is fundamentally on this intersection of community, content, and commerce. And sort of the way that I like to think about it is that all of the interesting problems in e-commerce today are at those intersections. So the sort of traditional e-commerce business has been supplemented by social, by mobile, and by content. And so that's a lot of what I'll be talking about today. I am going to try to leave time at the end for questions. I am from Boston, and Bostonians have a notorious reputation for talking incredibly quickly. For me, that's tempered a little bit by some time I spent as a college professor, and they have a reputation for speaking slowly and boringly. So hopefully somehow we'll meet in the middle. So I want to start with just some examples of this like phenomena. As I'm sure you all know, at some point back, Facebook morphed from the profile page being a thing of which you would become a fan to being something that you like. Right? And my perception has been, as Facebook has evolved, I don't have this straight from the horse's mouth, but from looking at it from the outside, that the whole concept of brands on Facebook was kind of an afterthought in the data model, that brands started out being just like a user's profile, and they sort of hacked in some extra extensions to it, and over time it's been evolving. So now the big thing is like, right? And this is Urban Outfitters, like us, and we'll like you back, right? Kind of a quid pro quo arrangement. Here's Gap, like us for sneak peeks and 1969 exclusives. That's not 1,969 exclusives. It's exclusives about their 1969 brand. And the stuff that's faded out below the fold there, below the first picture, is the content that you're going to get access to once you like. So it's sort of this giant red pointer saying, click that like button and then we'll give you stuff. It feels a little bit like, rats in a maze learning to push a lever. Right? We're training you to push this like button and that good things will come as a result. Ann Taylor Loft. I'm not actually a featured shopper at Ann Taylor Loft. I confess Leah Carey in our HR organization got this email and shared it with me. Actually giving you $20 off if you like them on Facebook. Right? So now the pellets are coming fast and furious, and now everybody's finally figured out where the La Jolla room and is also filing in. So we're talking about the Facebook like, we're talking about the way in which brands have started to leverage this, have started to train users to push this like button, have started to train us that in exchange for pushing the like button, we're going to get something, typically a discount, typically exclusives, typically something like that. Next example, TechCrunch, right? TechCrunch upping it a level, giving away an iPad. Aptaros is also giving away an iPad down in the sponsor pavilion, cheap plug. All you have to do is like TechCrunch and post about it and enter to win potentially an iPad, right? The most wanted gadget in front of the audience that they could possibly imagine, all in exchange for clicking this little like button. So the question that I keep coming back to is why, right? Why is it so important to these brands to get likes? And Justin Archer had this piece the other day in Media Post. Lots of big brands take pride in the number of likes they have. This is kind of like the number of friends people used to have on MySpace they used to brag about. It's the number of Valentines you got in elementary school. It's an indicator of popularity. But it seems so cheap, right? It's so artificial. It's so one-dimensional. People's relationships to brands are much more complicated than a simple yes-no on a like scale, right? They have things they like about brands and things they dislike about brands. They have aspirational brands. They have brands they're currently loyal to. There's all these sort of dynamic range of perception of a brand, and it gets turned into this like yes or no. And there isn't any real clear reason for the consumer of the ongoing relationship that's being established. It's a quid pro quo, it's a tit for tat, it's a like this and get $20 off. Never mind the fact that in liking us, you're opening up a long-term channel of conversation because we're not going to talk at all about what we're hoping to establish. We're just going to get you to click the like button. I think of it as sort of crack for direct marketers. So putting that in context, I want to talk a little bit about the acquisition funnel. So traditionally, we thought about the acquisition funnel as this model on the top. A certain number of people have an awareness of your brand. A certain smaller number have a familiarity. A smaller number than that actually consider your brand when they're thinking about making a purchase or when they're in the purchase funnel. An even smaller number than that actually purchase, and an even smaller number than that actually become loyal to you as a brand, right? Kind of traditional marketing funnel. The problem is that that overstates kind of the linear nature of the process, and it underestimates the power of loyalty. So McKinsey, David Cord and others in this report in the McKinsey Quarterly back in 2009 suggested that there's this customer journey that's a more accurate representation, and that's going on constantly, right? We're all constantly in these loops. We start out with an initial consideration set, and I think it makes sense to think through your own purchasing process since we're all also consumers as you think about this diagram. You go through this at very micro levels, and you go through it at very macro levels. You're thinking about buying a car that you might be in this journey for a long period of time. You're thinking about what brand of toothpaste to buy when you're at the grocery store. It's probably a relatively quick flip, right? But you still start out with an initial consideration set. There are brands you think about. There are brands you look for when you walk up to the shelf. There are car brands you have an affinity for. You go through some active evaluation in step 2 where you're thinking about these brands and evaluating them and shopping. And then you get to a moment of purchase. And one of the insights that they come out with in this research is that at that moment of purchase is when the brand decision is actually made. So however long this purpose of active consideration is, there's really a quick moment very close to the point of purchase where the decision actually gets made, sometimes against all the research that was done in the active evaluation phase. Anybody who's ever sold in a B2B market knows exactly how that feels at that point of purchase when it shifts. But then you go into this step 4, which is the post-purchase experience. And what they've uncovered is that there's a trigger point, and for some percentage of those who purchased get triggered into a loyalty loop which bypasses the whole next evaluation. For a lot of people, this is the first Apple product they bought, right? They bought a laptop, they bought an iPhone, they bought an iPad. And next time they go to buy a computer, they don't shop. They go into the Apple store and say, which one of the things am I going to buy, right? Not an active evaluation phase. But importantly, it's not just the loyalty loop that gets triggered. Inside this loyalty loop, customers become advocates. They enjoy their interaction with the brand. They enjoy what they've purchased. They advocate. They bond. They become enthusiasts. And in this world of social networking, and in this world in which communities online have tremendous influence, in which people trust the recommendations of their friends more than they trust the recommendations of paid salespeople, the opportunity to capture those advocates is critical. And that's why people are after the like button, right? That's why there's so much energy around like. So what I want to talk about today is these 3 stages of kind of how social intersects commerce, right? So on the first hand, there's social media marketing, which is what a lot of the energy and noise in the space is about. Not necessarily a lot of the work, but a lot of the energy and noise. Which is adding social media to your traditional media activities, right? So does having a Twitter feed of my latest deals actually help drive traffic to my e-commerce site? And I would argue that we're asking the wrong question here. In social media marketing, the question that we as platform vendors and as consultants are often trying to answer is something like, is social media effective? Or is Facebook or Twitter more effective at driving traffic to retailers? And I think it's the wrong question because we want to focus in, was campaign X successful for retailer Y based on this set of assumptions and constraints, right? I think we really need to start, as strategists, thinking more concretely about specific things that people are doing rather than trying to answer this abstract question. But so we'll talk a little bit about social media marketing. Next stage for me is what I've called social shopping. And my colleague Adam Michelson has a different 3. He starts with social media marketing, and then he goes to social shopping and social commerce. I think social business is a better name for that, and I know there are other taxonomies out there, but in the end, I think it matters little how we divide the 3 so much as the way we talk about them. So social shopping is adding that social layer to traditional e-commerce workflows, right? So it's the ratings and reviews, it's the share an item, it's wish lists and registries. These are things that are core e-commerce processes that now have kind of an additional social layer added to them. But they're not fundamentally transformed. They're sort of incrementally improved, right? For me, social business is the point at which we start talking about building wholly new applications and business models that couldn't exist before, right? Or that are fundamentally new, fundamentally transformative to the way the customer shops. And in all of these layers, I think we want to heed what Blake Nordstrom actually was talking about, putting the customer at the center, right? We have a tendency to come, well, I should include myself in that way, as technologists to come to a problem with what can we do rather than what does she or he, our customer, want to experience, right? So we get caught up in sort of what we're capable of doing rather than what they want. So social media marketing, this is a great comic from my friends at HubSpot, also in Boston. I have a Facebook group for Twitter users that tweet about podcasters that talk about marketing bloggers. My wife actually said to me the other day while we were watching the Super Bowl, I hate it when people say tweet and Twitter. It makes me want to vomit, as I was tweeting it. So I had to tweet it as an overheard. But we tend to get sort of wrapped up in the echo chamber. We tend to get wrapped up in sort of talking to each other. We tend to get wrapped up in the megaphone opportunity that social media represents, right? It's my ability to speak to the market rather than listening or rather than engaging in a conversation. I want to talk about a couple examples of places where people I think are doing slightly better. So one of the sort of core precepts in the social media world is that everything's traceable. And yet I find traceable and trackable, right? And yet I find a lot of people in their strategies on Facebook, on Twitter, and other social media are spraying links. Just sort of shotgun approach, pump out a link off an RSS feed every 10 seconds, post it on everything, and hope somebody enjoys it, right? Kind of amplify your voice in both frequency and noise and hope that therefore something useful comes out of it. What I think Abercrombie & Fitch are doing that's useful here are a couple of things. One is they're aware of their audience and they're writing in a tone and style that's appropriate. So we think of this as the return of content, right? We went through a phase on the web where content was king, and then as the market collapsed, I think a lot of retailers kind of went away from that and went down to very fast transactional sites, one click to check out, don't let any content get in the way, don't have any kind of brand, really just focus on efficiency. And I think we're starting to see the return of content as king again. The other thing that they're doing is those bit.ly URLs, right? So I took the top URL that they're posting there and looked at its bit.ly info. And it's a different URL because, in fact, there are multiple copies of this out there, but this is the sum aggregate of them all. And not only can you see the clicks that it's getting, but if you look at the full URL, right, they're actually assigning a source and a medium and a campaign so that they can then track not only did we send out this URL and 2,000 people liked it on Facebook or commented on it on Facebook, but we can actually then go into our analytics and say, of those people who came from that campaign, how many of them were new visits, how many of them were returning visitors, how many of them were customers, how many of them purchased, and what's the lifetime customer value of the customers that we tend to get through this channel. So rather than does Facebook or Twitter drive more clicks to retailers, they can specifically say, well, when we did the January 28, 2011 Facebook promo on this product, we found this result, right? They can get much more specific about what they're after. Great tool, which I think everybody should be familiar with. It's especially useful, obviously, if you're using Google Analytics, but if you're not, you should model something like it in your own analytics program. So how do I create a URL that carries with it enough information that I can do this kind of tracking, right? So I'm never putting a URL out there in social media that just lands on a landing page and hoping that I'm going to figure everything out from the referrer, because in the Facebook world, you're not going to get anything terribly useful. Let's put data in the URL itself. You're going to run it through a shortener anyway, and that way you'll know sort of where things came from. So another example of somebody I think doing this well is Macys. So Macys $1 Million Makeover. They're also doing the like button, but they're burying the like button inside a campaign and inside a longer term relationship and inside a focused effort that's appropriate to their audience, right? So you start out with this, you have to like Macys in order to be able to participate. As soon as you do, then you can watch the video, which tells you about the $1 Million Makeover, recognizable celebrity endorsement that people are interested in. And then if you proceed to the next stage, now it's a Facebook app. Well, what's the benefit to doing it as the Facebook app as opposed to just liking Macys, which was kind of an incidental step in the process? Now they can ask for all of this, right, and offer all of this. So they're accessing my information. They're getting the opportunity to send me an email. They're getting my email address, which you used to not be able to ask for on Facebook, but you have now been able to for a while. They're asking the opportunity to post to my wall, and they're going to access my photos and videos because it's part of the contest. Because in order to enter the contest, I'm going to upload photos of my fabulous fashion sense and share them with the world, right? And so it's appropriate content. It's focused on their audience. The only thing that I dislike about this whole approach that Macys has done is that they didn't take the time to make a custom icon for the app, right? So you get this like weird gear thing. Why is that not a Macy's logo? They're a client, but we had nothing to do with this promotion. That's a total disclaimer. So that's social media marketing. You have to do it. Your voice has to be out there, right? Talking about what the customer wants and where the customer spends their time. Your customers are on Facebook and Twitter. I don't care what industry you're in. I don't care what business you're in. Your customers are there. What percentage of them are there and how the best channels are to reach them are things you're going to need to figure out through experimentation and focus. But I just think this is one of the things, again, to quote Blake, where he was saying there are some places where you just need to go fast and other places where you need to tread cautiously. Well, this is a place where you need to go fast. You need to be there. You need to have a presence. You need to be engaged. You need to be having conversations with your customers. They expect it. If you don't get it from you, they'll get it from other people, and you should be there participating. So to talk about social shopping a little bit. Social shopping, as I said, is more about extending the e-commerce experience with some of these social activities. Log in with Facebook, as you may know from the past as Facebook Connect, now also has Facebook registration as an option, which lets people sign up for your site using their Facebook identity or supplanted by their Facebook identity, supplemented, I should say, so that you're getting their email address, you're getting more information about them. You can actually have a single registration form that works whether they're registering for you using their Facebook identity or have never been to Facebook and are just registering for your site. But you can use a single form. You get all the data. It's a fantastic way to sort of lower that friction of sign up. Not all of your customers are going to use it. Some of your customers are going to be anti-Facebook. I have been in that category at various points myself. It's a good idea to also be supporting OpenID and some of the other emerging standards. But the great majority of your customers are going to be using Facebook, right? Unless you're in selling laptops pre-installed with Linux, right? Which is a market where you might skew a little bit different. Another example, Dunkin Donuts. Again, in Boston, Dunkin Donuts are legion. I lived in a small town of 15,000 people, and we had 6 Dunkin Donuts in about 2 square miles, including 2 across the street from each other, right off Route 113, and both busy. And so they did this Keep It Colada, perfect opportunity to drive a kind of multi-channel experience that's appropriate to the way people think about Dunkin'. So it's what the customer wants. It's consistent with her experience. It's an opportunity to take a picture of yourself with the colada that you drink every day, use it as your Facebook status, post it as your profile, and enter a contest. They got a whole lot of people to participate in this. Today, this might get in trouble. Facebook's rules have tightened about using what they call the native apps, the built-in apps. So things like your status profile, you're not supposed to use in promotions, but use is always a little, there's always a little bit of wiggle room with Facebook, so you probably get away with it. Another example, this is actually Aptaros' Ocentric platform, and this is a module that we released into the Magento community. So it's this social shopping tab on any given product in your Magento store. Use Facebook Connect to say, I want to ask my friends about this item, right? So I'm going to buy a digital camera. I don't know anything about digital cameras. I can click on Ask My Friends, connect through Facebook Connect, pull up a list of my friends that are on Facebook and even see who's online and who's not online, and say, hey, Dave, should I get this camera or this camera? Or what the hell is a megapixel and why do I care? Or whatever it is that I want to ask. They get a notification directly in their Facebook stream or in Facebook chat. They can respond to it. The data all ends up on the product page and in Facebook, so you get kind of the benefits of the stream on both sides. I stay on your site. He stays in Facebook if that's where he was, and yet we have this conversation. Really nice way to kind of extend the conversation. Still core to the e-commerce experience, but it's extending the conversation in a new way by making this available. And I'm going to make this presentation available, I should have said. I'm also J Eckman, J-E-C-K-M-A-N on Twitter. You can @ me later, and I'll send you a link. I'll put it up on SlideShare, and I think it's going to be available from the Magento folks as well. So the first link here on the top is a blog where there's a screencast where you can see me walk through how this feature works, and then the bottom is its page in the Magento Connect. So Facebook commerce, or F-commerce. And we've had a lot of debate internal to Aptaros about calling it F-commerce because I think it's way too easy for it to become F-commerce, because that's kind of the experience that a lot of people get. But this is eMarketer data. 67% want to use Facebook to drive traffic. Like I said, I think that's a no-brainer. Yes, you should be driving traffic, though even the fact you're thinking of it as driving traffic rather than engage with my customers in a conversation is probably a weak way to think of it, but that's all right. They probably mean the same thing. 44% plan to use Facebook apps in place of microsites for launches and specific promotions like the Macy's $1 Million Makeover I was just showing. I think that's a great thing. I think the Facebook application platform itself has actually been underutilized by e-commerce players. Not, again, as a way to host their store, but as a way to do other kinds of promotions and engagements with customers. And then the last one, 25% plan to build e-commerce applications on Facebook itself. Now, again, that depends a little bit on what you mean by an e-commerce application in Facebook. But here's an example, and this is an example that I have written about a couple of times quite negatively. Is JCPenney in the room? All right, good. So I've met them at East West. They're great folks, but I think this is the wrong approach. So JCPenney and ASOS, I know 30% of the room is outside the US, so ASOS in the UK might be a better known brand that's taking the same approach. Leveraging usable net, right, which is came out of the mobile minification space. So they proxy your site, create a minimized version of it that can be used on phones, right? A lot of you run into this when you're doing mobile. And what they've developed is a way of therefore burying that inside a Facebook iframe, right? So the JCPenney store, like the ASOS store, is a fully shoppable e-commerce experience inside Facebook. That's a great idea, but I think there are a couple of problems. One is that we start to talk about how much time consumers spend in Facebook, and our metaphors get in our way, right? We think of them going to Facebook as though it's a place, as though it's a mall, and they're stuck in that anchor tenant at the mall, and they're stuck in the Facebook. The reality is, if you actually watch people use Facebook, and I know I may be a bit more off the curve in terms of tech savviness or tech desire, I'm kind of a digital immigrant, than the majority, but not that far off. They're in Facebook, yes, but they also have 50 other tabs open. They're also in their email. They're also on the phone. They're also watching TV. They're also watching their kids. They're also doing a million other things, right? So this notion of sort of Facebook as a portal, I think, is just as mistaken now as the portals were 10 years ago or 5 years ago, when they thought the portal was going to be your view onto the internet. And I would be so stuck in this portal that I would only be able to find things that are inside the Facebook, right? As though going to another tab to shop jcpenney.com is some giant impediment to commerce that's preventing me from buying things that I would buy if only I could do it inside this little iframe, right? Which just doesn't make any sense to me at all. It's also got some usability issues because as you browse down through the categories, your URL never changes, so your back button's broken, right? This is back to Frames circa 1999. This is what we learned about Frames the first time, and we still haven't apparently figured that out, that it's a bad experience for the customer. What's great about it is I can share an individual product and get a link directly to that product that somebody else can come here and buy. Well, that's the thing I think we need to take from this experience, right? What's the appropriate experience for a customer to have inside Facebook? And why is it different than the full catalog browse experience? Because I just don't think the full catalog browse experience is going to do it. It's not what I want to do while I'm there. It might be more like some of these other ideas that we'll talk about in social business. So I apologize if that's a little washed out, white on white doesn't always come through. Yochai Benkler, author of The Wealth of Networks, what I like to think of as the sort of Das Kapital of social commerce, right? Big, heavy, thick, Yale economics, PhD kind of book, but full of insights. What he talks about is the economic role of social behavior is increasing. Things that would just dissipate in the air as social gestures now become economic products. So it used to be that my recommending a product to a friend was just a social gesture. It was just something that I would do. Hey, I really liked that album. You should go check it out. Now it's becoming a business model, right? It's becoming an actual economic product, this social gesture that I might take. So a couple examples of that. I use Living Social. Could have used Groupon, obviously the 800-pound gorilla in that space. Group buying, right? Aggregating groups together to make purchases in a way that hasn't been done before on the buyer side. Now, arguably, Groupon itself has evolved to the point where it's become more of an email marketing campaign. The group that I joined by joining Groupon is the group of people willing to buy stuff. It's kind of the most generic group possible. But in its theory, if you go back to the point and you go back to what it evolved out of, or if you look at the work of like Project VRM, Vendor Relationship Management, work that's being done at the Berkman Center at Harvard, they're talking about what if you could actually allow people to identify a need and express it in a way that could be computationally aggregated, that could be pulled together by technology and turned into a bid that then retailers respond to, right? So that it would actually be driven group buying by the group themselves, coming together, forming a buying community and buying. Other examples, Walmart's CrowdSaver. Again, Walmart's a client, but we didn't have anything to do with this particular work that they did. Now, you could argue that CrowdSaver is a little bit like the like button. You have to like Walmart first to be able to participate in the CrowdSaver. But what I like about what they're doing, again, is the content and the focus. So Walmart's everyday low prices, right? That's their focus. It's what they do. It's what they live and breathe. So for Walmart to be doing a Saver app doesn't seem off-brand. Whereas to me, even for Ann Taylor Loft, and I had this conversation with Leah Carey, who's the one who shared it with me, she said, you know, it feels a bit like it cheapens the relationship, right? It feels a bit off-brand to me. It feels like it's a quid pro quo in a way that doesn't make sense with what they're doing. So Walmart CrowdSaver, if you haven't seen it, if enough people like the deal, then the deal is on. And at that point, the deal is available to everybody. So they kind of mix the metaphors a little bit. You do have to participate to trigger the deal, but then once the deal triggers, it's available to everyone. But it lets them really focus in on what they do well, which is large-scale merchandising to a mass audience, and yet get social, yet get likes, get the opportunity to communicate with you through the app, get a better experience. Another example, this is the Etsy recommendation store. So here we're leveraging the social graph, right? We're leveraging the Facebook Open Graph protocol, and actually being able to say, I know who your friends are, or Facebook knows who your friends are, and I can access that with your permission is probably a better way to say it. And I can look at what they've said they like and make gift recommendations based on that, right? So I log in, I look up Chris Fuller, my colleague who runs our Bucharest Operations Center for Ocentric, and I find out he likes FML, which I'll let you Google on your own to find out what FML stands for, but and he likes Neil Young. Now, the algorithm's not perfect. You notice the Young ones ends up as the third one down on the right? Which I don't think the Young ones ever had any real intersection with Neil Young that I'm familiar with as a fan of the show. So it's, you know, it's reading text, it's figuring out Neil Young is an artist, and therefore there are these things that are associated with Young, and maybe it's not getting it perfect. But think about what this would have been like in the pre-social graph era. How would any retailer have said, I can find out who your friends are, and I can find out what they like, and I can then look through my catalog of stuff and tell you, here are things that person likes, right? All more or less instantaneously, right? With very little effort on my behalf. Another example, which you might be more familiar with, is the Amazon store. Similar concept, also leveraging the Open Graph. Their great insight, which seems so patently obvious now, but nobody else had done it yet, was Facebook knows when your friends' birthdays are. People buy gifts for their friends on their birthdays, right? I mean, this just, to me, is so obvious now that it seems counterproductive that nobody thought of it before, but it's true. So they can show me people's birth dates, and then they can show me things that they like, and again, make recommendations based on the things that they liked, right, so that I could buy. What I'd love to see is the next step, which is let me aggregate some of my friends together and buy a joint gift for somebody, right, and actually do group buying. And maybe I'd push that inside Facebook. Right? So Amazon's taken the approach of pulling everything out, using the APIs, keeping you on the Amazon site. JCPenney's taken the approach of let's take the whole e-commerce site and shove it inside Facebook. I think the real interesting stuff that's going to evolve over the next couple of years is going to be a mixture of the two, in which some of the idea is to pull Facebook social graph information out into the e-commerce experience. Some of the information is pulling transactional information closer to where you're spending time inside Facebook. But it's going to be more impulse-driven. It's got to be more narrowed, focused product selection. I don't know that anybody's really going to have the tolerance for the traditional landing page, category page, shelf page, item page, up and down yo-yo that we've been doing on e-commerce sites inside an iframe in Facebook. I just don't think that's the way they're going to go. Another example of sort of social business is what we call embedded retail communities. So this is bringing the community inside the retail experience. And again, it's a focus on community and content. So this is health.walmart.com, and in particular, this is the diabetes wellness shop. And so the idea is not only is there a content and community wrapped around health as a category, but there's a different way to shop for products. Say you're a newly diagnosed diabetic. You don't necessarily want to have to walk the aisles to figure out the difference between durable medical equipment, which is where the testers are, and whatever category they call it where they put the strips. I don't even remember. You don't necessarily want an experience in which you have to go do research over on WebMD and then try to find somewhere to buy stuff from because WebMD won't sell it to you, right? So you want a place where that's all brought together. So they bring in content from WebMD and Health Notes and IL-7 and others about diabetes. They have buying guides, they have discussion forums, they have tools, they have all these sort of opportunities. And persistently available throughout the experience is add this to cart. Right? So it doesn't become an intrusive experience where I interrupt you reading an article to say, buy now, buy now, buy now, with a pop-up. But it's persistently available in the wrapper as you move through the experience, bringing together the content with the community all in one place. Another example of social business is this consumer-to-consumer merchandising space. People have always recommended products to each other. Bloggers have been doing this for a long time. The affiliate model has been the dominant model. So I send links out and I get an affiliate fee. Increasingly, what we're seeing is platforms built from the ground up to enable consumer-to-consumer merchandising and to enable it to be transactional directly. So don't send me to Polyvore and have me look at a great collage of somebody's items that they put together and then I click on them and 9 out of 10 of them are sold out when I get to the affiliate store. Have that store have sense of inventory. Have it know what's going on, right? Integrate it into the e-commerce experience in a way that wasn't possible before. And lastly, we'll talk about private event retail. So private event retail or flash sales, limited time, limited inventory, invite-only experience. Counterintuitive to everything you think you know about e-commerce. Hide everything behind a landing page, behind a login. No search results whatsoever. You can't see what's on the site until you're a member, right? Go to rulala.com today. If you don't have a login, you can request an invite. That's it. You can't do anything else, right? Very counterintuitive to sort of the rules of e-commerce. Once you are in, there's a very limited inventory and it sells out very quickly, right? Again, sort of counter to the rule of e-commerce, you would think you want to make sure you always have inventory available and you want to make sure that you can engage with customers and they'll have plenty to purchase. But this isn't the model in private event. Rue is also now expanding into more of hyper-local, which I would include as another trend. Right? Hyper-local, along with recommendations from your social graph, along with mobile, is kind of a way of triangulating where I think the future of commerce is going. Right? We always talk about it's getting more social, it's getting more mobile, it's getting more community, it's getting more content. They're all happening. The rate of speed at which you're allowing it to happen in your merchandising flow says more about you than it does about your customers. Right? And so lastly, Joss & Main, another private event retail site, again, talking about sharing your personal links, sharing on your social networks, allowing people to invite, but making sure that you're providing enough traceability that you know where they've been invited from. So yes, it's still traditional affiliate in the sense of people sign up and shop. There's a kickback to the person who invited them. If you need invites for Rulala or Joss & Main, let me know. But it's also then they can determine over time of the people who get invited via Facebook, what is their customer lifetime value turn into be? Of the people who get invited via Twitter, what's the sign-up rate and what's their lifetime value? Because maybe Twitter drives more traffic, but you know what? Maybe it's poorly qualified traffic. Maybe Facebook actually drives people who purchase in the long run. I don't know yet. We'll find out, but that's the approach. John Millikan, our client at CSN Stores, had this to say. There's a lot of upfront work, and then at 11 a.m., that's Eastern time, so we've missed it already this morning. When the bell rings, the crowd goes wild. In all my years of retail, and he's a retail veteran, I've never seen customer acquisition work like this, right? We need to be thinking not just incrementally about social media marketing, how we get our message out there in front of clients. We need to be thinking about social shopping. How do I ensure, I think it's unforgivable. If you have a product detail page that doesn't allow me to share a particular product quickly and easily, you're out of date, right? And I still visit e-commerce experiences where that product page has a query string URL that's 30 pages long that has session data in it that my wife wants to email me, oh, look at this thing, and I can't get it because I'm not in her session because I'm in a different route, right? How many people are still stuck at that level? We need to get beyond it. Can I create a wish list? Can I create a registry? Can I share it with other people? Are you able to track what effectively drives that behavior? And then thinking about social business, right? And this means thinking about what do you bring to the equation as a brand, as a retailer. Is it product and inventory that's unique? Is it a brand legacy that's unique? Is it an audience that you've aggregated over years, carefully curated that you have to offer? And then what's in it for her, the shopper, right? We have a tendency to start from what does the technology allow us to do? Now let's make up a business model that justifies it, right? Oh, we can do this. Okay, well, why would somebody want that? Well, then we'll think up all these justifications for why somebody wants to do that, instead of starting from listening to them with what they want to do and following in that direction. And with that, I think I have allowed some time for Q&A. And because we're recording, we're going to ask you to ask questions on mic.
First of all, do you want to say a big thanks to John for his talk?
You're very welcome.